From Los Angeles and Nashville, get ready to go behind the scenes with Entertainment Dudes. What happens when you pair a director, a voice actor in a world, and some of the most interesting people in entertainment? You're about to find out.
Gotta get this popcorn out of my teeth first. All right, we're clean.
All right, we're already rolling. So.
Well, I'm editing this episode then. Or else I know exactly what will be our GIF.
Okay, you edit the episode.
Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If I pass this mic, welcome to another episode of Dudes. We're really excited that you're... And we have a special guest. A very special guest. One of my favorite people in the entire world.
In one way, he's a great guest, but then in the other way, he's kind of responsible for bringing you into this world. So,
which makes him just a great person overall.
Oh, okay.
I mean, think about it.
That's your viewpoint.
Can you think about anything more important than bringing me into the world? Literally.
Actually, yes. I had a dream last night.
Wait, what was your dream?
My dream. This is out of left field, but you're talking about more important than bringing you into the world. So,
gotta be
I was on the side of the stage of a Phil Collins concert, and he was doing the "In the Air Tonight."
I can feel it.
Right. He was doing the drum solo from it, but he was doing it with bananas instead of drumsticks. It's just like. So it's like,
every time he hit the drums, the bananas exploded.
It was amazing. I'm like, not only am I seeing Phil Collins do this live, I'm seeing him use bananas to do it. So,
that drives me bananas. So, anyways, without further ado, we are really excited to welcome my father.
Hey, Padre!
My father.
Hey.
He's an author, a musician, a director, and an extraordinary human being. And I've been trying to beg him to come on the show, but every time he's like, I'm busy, I have stuff to do.
Except for that time where you didn't show up and he was here. But.
All right. Last
Ken
week.
Ken and I bonded over that. We were bonding.
Thought we had an hour. Later, we're doing our 10 o'clock slot, and I missed our last.
Yeah, here we are. And one of the things that Cam and I were talking about at the time was the importance among real professionals of showing up on time. I mean, a lot of people are depending on you. Yeah. And you had countless viewers all around the world who were tuned in at that moment. And they were waiting to see, well, I'm not going to belabor the point,
They were waiting to see you, of course.
Well, obviously.
So I had something pretty wild. I
feel like second banana here now. Maybe third banana. You had two bananas. I'm third banana. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you play your... I feel it coming in.
I want to know you. I just before we go on, I want you to know I got the improv script.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, we're all set.
Great. It looks white, blank.
Right.
No, it's good. On the other side.
Scripted improv.
So Jason is he's really a genius. I think he's.
Oh yeah.
It's got all that.
Good.
And the stuff about Cam, we've got.
Good.
So before we go on and actually start this thing, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I'd received that.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining our show. I think today would be really excited to talk about. You has been an independent artist. You've started a number of your own companies. You've been doing lots of charity and missionary work. I think currently right now living overseas.
That's what we tell you.
Yeah. So you. We moved out of the country, son. We live very
far away.
What's the most remote country that he's never heard of? Oh,
actually, we made up the name of the country we're in. It doesn't have a postcode or anything. Sorry.
I tried finding it on the map. It must be just a new country. So, One thing I think that you mentioned, like I'm just going to share really briefly part of my growing up. I remember my dad being, he was working at Henderson Advertising. You were working there in Greenville. And I remember waking up and you were already gone just because your work started so early. And I was going to bed and before you came back. And I remember a long time when I just didn't see you because you were so busy. And then one day, Dad comes home and he says, "We're moving. We're packing up the house. We're moving. We put everything out on the yard for a yard sale." And we're like, "Where are we going?" He said, "We're moving to England."
No, I
And
said Spain first.
oh,
Mother said
Spain,
England. Yeah,
Spain. Okay,
mother
England.
vetoed that. Yeah.
And you were at the top. I mean, you were at the top of your game at the moment. Tell me about what was happening. I mean, you were doing really, really well.
I was. I had the ideal job. It was perfect. I had an executive creative director. There were several creative teams in the agency, and each of those was assigned, a group of products that they did the work for. I was in a unique position where, being a copywriter and an artist and a voiceover person and a musician, I was able to float from one of those teams to the other, and it was just an ideal situation. I loved it. And one day I came in, and this was shortly after I had written a jingle that secured us a big contract with a company. It was $11 million contract, and so I was riding high, and I came in. Actually, it was about 2 weeks later, and found out that my executive creative director had run off with the wife of the owner of that particular company.
Oh,
Didn't go over well. Uh, we kept the company as a client, oddly enough,
a
but
testament to your excellence.
the creative director departed under sort of a cloud. Anyway, the thing was, it went from being just an ideal situation where I could tap into all of my creative interests, and it went to just a political nightmare as they scanned the horizon for a new executive creative director, and a lot of different people came in and they were tried out and they came and went, and it was, the political situation was just uh, very, very frustrating. And I had always wanted to be a serious writer, so I thought, well, this is a good time. We had a good amount of money, enough to sustain us for a year or so, and so I came home that day and I told Mom, we're going to move to Spain. We're going to sell the house. Now, this was her dream house that we had just bought 2 years earlier.
Wow. So it got so political. Uh, you saw a future for yourself in one of your other dreams. So what went on after this?
Well, a lot of blackmail went on.
Uh-huh.
But I was blackmailed by my wife and by my children. The first blackmail was that my wife said, if you're going to sell my house, then you're going to have to promise me that you finish anything you begin. Because I was a great beginner. I could write 30 pages of a book like that. And then I'd lose interest, or I'd find interest in something else. And I was just not focused. I was creative, but not focused. And creative, but not focused is sort of like a tornado. It's destructive. And so she made me promise that anything I began when we moved to England, I would finish. So I promised. Now I was a heavy smoker at the time, so that's when the second blackmail came in. And when we told the kids, we're moving to England, and Jason, who particularly didn't like smoke, he said, "Well, I'm not going unless you promise to stop smoking." So here I am. This is the first night of my big adventure. And already I've been subject to blackmail twice. I'm having to give up smoking, and I'm having to promise to finish anything I began, which I've never done. so, and then Jason's sister joined him in that little bit of blackmail as well. So,
I call it a revolution.
all of a sudden, my dream was taking on some, you know, characteristics of, oh my gosh, this is real. Uh, anyway, I didn't think at the time that I was really pressed. I did resign, but I was kept on. They asked if I would stay on as a creative consultant until such time as I left, whenever that might be. I thought, well, it'll be a year or two, because there was another house just down the street from ours that had been on the market when we bought ours, and it was still on the market, 2 years, 2.5 years later. So I figured, well, it's going to be a while. So we put the house on the market independently. We didn't contact a realtor. We just put it in the local newspaper, and 9 days later, it sold.
Not
So
yeah.
all of a sudden, all of a sudden, my little idea, and I had ideas like this all the time. I want to move to Bolivia and plant coffee or something. But here it was, and all of a sudden, all of these things real, and it sort of took on a momentum of, it's like I declared something and somebody was listening.
How often do I say I want to do this and this, and no one's listening? I mean, why this particular thing?
Yeah, really. Well, it did, and we took off. So we took off and we sold the house, and with the proceeds from that, we were able to live in England, and the kids went to school there. So that's how all it started. But I think that getting back to the point about the politics in the agency at the time, I think for a creative person, especially someone with several creative interests, there was no more invigorating in an environment than that was, because I got to do a little bit of everything I love, and I was traveling all over the country and working with some of the best talent, in the world, and so that was just wonderful. And then it all became this political, and I just lost interest. I had loved to go into work on Monday, and then by Friday it was, I don't want to go into work anymore. I want to stay home and talk and raise, that kid.
Bree.
Yeah, Bree.
And then he'd always look at me and go, "Who are you?" I'm like, I'm your son." Oh, that's right. I have a son.
You're your mother's first child.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that that's England is really the time that I have the memories of you. I think I was old enough. I was 8, but I remember you being there, and I never ever, like, all the way until I graduated high school. That's how I remembered it. You were just always there. Every game I'd ever had, I was, you followed me everywhere. I couldn't get away, but no, I always just felt like I gained a dad when we moved out there. You were.
Oh, you definitely
there.
did. You remember that in one of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies, when Sean Connery said to Harrison Ford, when Harrison Ford was complaining about never having dad until he was, 35 or whatever.
Junior.
Sean Connery said, "You just become interesting."
You just become.
So,
That's right. You're there. I'm interested now. This is actually an interesting person.
no, but I did realize that how much I was missing, and the impact of advertising and my career had a negative impact on my family, on my marriage, and on my being a father and being there, being present. So both Mom and I made the decision then that I wouldn't fall into that chasm again, and we intentionally devoted our time to you guys, thinking that it would have done some good. Obviously, it didn't. But we thought,
Too bad. Too bad. Wasted time.
I could have been in the black hole of advertising all that
time. We saved you. So it's interesting to figure out how about balancing creative. I see a lot of struggles that are a lot with my friends that are girls in particular. About family, the requirements of a creative field in order to actually have an income or to create something, the requirements are extreme, especially in film and TV. And how do you balance that, the desire to spend time with your family and also explore in a creative field that demands so much time and energy? What would you say would be, I don't know, a good approach to face that conundrum?
Well, in my case, it was tied to my faith. I think that that's really what kept me grounded
Mm-hmm.
and made me realize that I'm here in life, but I'm living an eternity. This is just a little segment of my eternity. So, what impact for the best am I going to make with the time I'm given that will affect people positively in an eternal context? So I think that helped a lot, and I thought, well, the best thing I can do at this stage in my life is invest in my family, and that became my joy. I loved going to your games and watching you get beaten at so many sports. It was just
Thanks.
no, that's not true. The truth is, I was living vicariously through you because you're a great athlete.
How do you go in? You obviously were in a situation, it was at the expense of your family, but in a creative situation that is very rare. If you have so many interests, you usually can't do all your interests at once in your job. But how did you go from that to focusing? I know it's tough. I have a bunch of interests as well. How did you go from that to focusing on basically one creative interest?
Well, it was the result of that promise that I made.
Okay.
I believe that when you make a promise, you have to follow through with it, and a lot of that is my faith, and I didn't make that promise lightly. I mean, when she said you have to promise to finish everything you started, if you're going to sell my house, you're going to promise to finish everything you start, and I realized that once that promise was out of my mouth, that I had to focus on what I was doing. Now, she didn't say I could only concentrate on one thing. She said you need to finish everything you start.
Okay.
And I did finish. I did start a book and two screenplays and a series of children's stories and an EP. And I finished all of those while I was there. And it was so satisfying because for the first time I could point at some creative endeavor, something that had started as an idea, and I could say, my gosh, I can do this. I can focus. I can finish things that I start. So it was a tremendous learning experience. It was great.
Do you think any of that was related to kind of like you'd be ADD today, or do you think it was just being a creative?
Well, you know what? Now this might be of interest to some people. The all of the time when I was growing up, I was a night person, and I was always drawing or writing songs or writing stories or whatever. And so I was very creative, and I assumed, naturally that it was because I was a genius, and that's what geniuses do. They stay up all night and they create things.
Why don't I stay up all night?
And so, I thought that's the way it was until I was about 35, and then I had this little health issue, and the doctor was going over my diet and things like that, and trying to ascertain what the root cause of my problems. And he said, "Well, how about any caffeine in your life?" And I said, "Well, I drink 2 or 3 gallons of Coke a day. Do you mean something like that?" And he said, "Yeah. How about if you don't drink any Coke?" So I quit Coke cold turkey, and all of a sudden I couldn't stay up past 8 o'clock. I said, I wasn't a genius. I was just addicted.
that was still when it had cocaine in it, right?
No, it wasn't quite that long ago. But it was an awakening,
I bet it was. I bet it was.
John Pemberton and I were like that.
I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not a genius. I'm just cocaine addicted. I mean, Coke addicted. So,
Coca-Cola.
Tell me about getting a book published, because I think a lot of people think I just write my book and I send it to the agent and they publish it. So, and
I told you that story a couple of weeks ago about that lady in Connecticut. I was almost ready to hire a hitman.
Tell me about this process. About how do you get a book published?
Well, in that case, it was great. The book that I'd written while I was in England was never published, but it was my training ground, and that was I had started out writing in fantasy, and the trouble with fantasy is that anything's possible, and when you're a creative person, then that means you can just go anywhere, and you need to develop tremendous discipline if you're going to write a fantasy because so many possibilities introduce themselves, and they can carry you away from what your narrative is, and you just lose track. So I had started writing this book, and I had intended, like C.S. Lewis, to start out with five separate stories, five sets of characters, and just weave them all beautifully together. And at the end of 700 handwritten pages, I had basically five books in the works, and none of them wanted to play with each other. It was just so. Anyway, Mom is a great mystery reader. She loves reading mysteries, and she would have mysteries, on the shelves all over the place. She'd read them at night, and one day she said, "Why don't you try writing a mystery?" Well, the thing about mystery is that it's very targeted. You have to know the end from the beginning so you can leave the proper clues and red herrings and so on as you go along. So I decided that I would. I wrote this book with my protagonist was named Albert, who was a musical savant on the autistic spectrum.
What are you tapping on? Are you doing Morse code while you're...
No, I'm programming the drum machine over here on my.
Okay. I was like, all I'm hearing. I was like, this is a good story, but someone's playing drums over there.
I'm trying to.
Banana drums.
I'm sorry about that.
We forgive you.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever I was saying, that's where I was.
Mysteries. So yeah, planning how you were saying you have to.
So I wrote this mystery every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. Before I often made you guys breakfast, I'd get up and I'd ride my bicycle to the equivalent of the Dunkin' Donuts in those days. It wasn't Dunkin' Donuts, but it was another one. And I'd sit there and I'd write longhand for 2 hours and come home and go about my day. And had a full-time job at the time as well. So every morning I would do that, and so at the end of 2 years of doing that, I had a completed book, and I sent it off to my mother was a writer. So I sent it off to her agent, and she peddled it around for a little while, and it was rejected for one reason or another. And so finally I put it on the shelf, and that's just before we moved to Maine, and then got another job in Maine. We were working there. That's when we started working for the government. And I was walking through. You remember we had that rented cottage on Spruce Head in Maine at that time, and I was walking through the house, and I saw on a coffee table one of Mom's books, and it was written by Marjorie Allingham, who was a very, very popular, very good British writer back in the 50s and 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I looked at it, and it was printed by or published by Carroll and Graf, which is a New York company that specialized in marketing British mystery writers in the United States. So I said, well, I've never heard of them. So I took the manuscript out, dusted it off, stuck it in an envelope together with a little letter, and send it off. Not really expecting much, but it's going to cost me postage, and So I sent it off, and the next week I got a call from the publisher, Kent Carroll, and he said, "I just read your book and I love it. Will you let us publish it?" And I said, "Really, no, I don't think so." Thanks for the offer.
Yeah, that's what I'd have said too. Like, what? No. That depends how much you're willing to pay me. Yes, I'll do it.
No, I said, it depends on how much I have to pay you. I want to tell aspiring authors out there.
Yes.
Under no circumstances ever do you pay anyone to publish your book. Never, never, never. No agent, no publisher, nothing. That is a scam. After I get that off my chest, I just want to make sure people know that.
Well, it's the same here for an agent. You shouldn't ever, if an agent's like, hey, pay me and I'll be your agent. Never, ever, ever, ever pay your agent.
Pay your doctor. Don't pay your agent.
Yes.
no.
So you've
But
done advertising. You've done. You were talking about writing, and wasn't there a time when you were also considering coming to Nashville?
oh yeah, well, I was in
Or
Nashville. Yeah,
okay.
I went to. I was came to a point again. This was my wife's fault, really, because uh, she developed a love for country music back
Uh huh.
in the days of Vince Gill and Garth Brooks and those guys, and she was listening to them all the time, and I really developed an appreciation for the storytelling music, and so I started writing storytelling country type songs, and then we came to Nashville. We moved to Nashville because of Jason, and we didn't know he was there, so we moved there.
What are you guys doing here?
What a surprise that was! And anyway, I was sort of pursuing the career in country music, and there's a place in Nashville called the Bluebird Cafe,
Mm-hmm.
which they have an open mic night on Monday nights, or they did in those days. I don't know if they still do, where anyone can go in and you can sing two songs or maybe three songs. I think it was two songs at the time. And, you have a little audience and you get a reaction, and everybody goes in the hopes that there's going to be a talent scout there or record executive. But in some cases, there actually have been people who have been discovered there. So I went in on a couple of Monday nights, and then if you sort of pass a certain level of appreciation from the people who worked there at the time, then you would be invited to be part of the songwriters group, which would present on Sundays, I think, or Wednesdays, and you'd even be invited to be part of a 2 or 3 member songwriter panel that would perform and then take Q&As and things like that. So I was elevated to that position. So I was really enjoying it, but at the same time, I had lost a lot of the passion that I had when I was very young, the kind of passion that will sustain you through a lot of rejection, like some people you need to go through in order to you have to develop thick skin. And my interest was much more in the story, telling the story, than making $1 million with the story. I really enjoyed performing for small groups of people like that, and I liked the back and forth of a small, intimate audience and being able to answer questions.
And Taylor
And
Swift opened for him
Taylor
at the
Swift
Bluebird.
opened for me. She did. She was 14. It was her first foray to Nashville. She came down, I think, from Pennsylvania. She was 14 or 15 years old. And talk about persistent. That kid had persistence. As a vocalist, her talents were minimal, but she was a great little storyteller. And so one night she was there with her dad sitting in the corner, and she came up and she sang a couple of songs, and they were sweet. And I was the next person who came up. So I've been telling people ever since that she's been riding on my shoulders all these years.
After your experience with, you had a publisher, and you've also published books yourself. Which route would you say you would go as a writer? Like what do you think now? Like if you had it to do all over again, you had your books. What would you do, and what would you caution somebody to look out for? Maybe when they're writing, like your rights to your books, or
Wait a second.
plug.
I'm sorry. What you were?
Oh, okay.
Oh! I'm sorry. That just fell off the shelf.
Mom was gonna be our audience member is gonna be very excited that Mom will buy another copy.
Actually, my first 6 books were all published by established publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very frustrating because they could not. They were on a schedule. Basically, I would start writing, and then 3 years later, it would finally appear on the shelves, and that was just very frustrating.
Breakneck speeds.
Well, yeah, it was in those days. And then you went through the whole process was just so archaic, and still is. It's amazing how traditional publishers have been so slow to adapt to, even the 19th century. They're still way back in, the Gutenberg press and all that. Yeah. The However, I'm sorry, I'm tapping again. The difference between going with a traditional publisher and publishing yourself is that with the traditional publisher, they take care of the marketing, they get the preview copies off to the right critics and all of that, and they have the credentials that you don't have as an independent. So I published 10 books independently. And from a purely creative standpoint, that's much more rewarding. I can publish a book. I've got some friends who are my editors. They edit the book. I rewrite the book depending on the edit. I have it to my satisfaction. I design the covers myself, so I don't need to go through that process. And I'm able to do everything myself, so I don't need any third parties. And then once I hit publish, it's available around the world that afternoon. And if I've got another book in the pipes, I can write it, and 6 months later, I can do the same thing. So I'm able to be a lot more prolific and get the books out there. That said, when you're writing, what are you not doing? You're not marketing.
Right.
So I'm a writer. I want to write. So I get tremendous satisfaction from writing the books. I love to write the books. I love my characters. I love to get them out there. And if they catch fire, they catch fire, which is sort of where I am at this point in my career. Again, I'm old enough so it doesn't really matter. I'm not looking for fortune and fame. I'm just very satisfied getting my stories out. But my first couple of books, they had bestsellers, and you get anywhere from beginning authors who get 7% of gross.
7%. That's it.
7% of net. Anywhere from 7 to 17%. Somebody like Stephen King will get maybe 15%. I got 7%. Maybe 8%, something like that. So it's a lot of work. And I figured in the end, it worked out to about a nickel an hour is what I was getting.
Wow. How'd you make so much?
So you have to take satisfaction in the creative process in what you're doing. And you have to be passionate enough to want to tell your story, even if it's not going to make you wealthy or get you famous. That said, I got a lot of great press across the country from those first books, and that also is sort of something that gives you a little bit of a boost over most, the 10 million other would-be authors out there, because I do have these credentialed reviewers from New York Times, Chicago Times, LA Times, Publishers Weekly, and all these who gave me great reviews, and that was great. So I think it depends on what your goal is. And a younger person, obviously, a younger writer wants to make enough money so they can make a living, and that's admirable. And they're not going to do it on Amazon, at least not immediately. It'll take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you're going to have to do a lot of marketing, and you're going to have to do a lot of those things that creative people typically don't like to do. I prefer to spend my time writing as opposed to marketing, which is why so many people out there have never heard of me. So,
wow. So what's your favorite character? Who would you say? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, well, I do. I have a favorite character. His name is Albert. He's that savant musician from the first series. It's like, I don't know. I just love Albert, and I love to write. And I'm writing a new book on the fifth in his series right now. I've been working on it for the last 2 weeks, and there's something about him. I just love him. I love writing about him, and I never know what he's going to do. And he always surprises me, because characters take over a life of their own, and they begin to dictate to you, rather than, you're just trying to keep up with what they're doing, what they're saying, and I feel like that's what I'm doing, is taking dictation. And it's always, he has such an abstract conception of reality that, like I said, he's on the autistic scale, but he's also a musical savant, and so there are things to which he relates and things he simply does not relate to, like groceries.
Yeah, I don't relate to groceries.
No, or telephones or buttons of any kind.
It was an amazing story. I love them. I think I like stories that are character driven. I like building the world, the idea about what I want the world to be like, and then the characters, almost like you said, inform themselves and they come alive in front of you. I love it when you get to the point when you don't even realize that you're writing. You just it's literally just like there's a portal that opens and it's flowing through, and I'm like you said, I feel like you're following a character, and they're
Yeah.
and you can tell it, like it's not your words. It's like I write something and it's like they stop. I wouldn't say that. I'm like, well,
I
I mean,
know.
she responds here like this. Nope.
Sometimes, and I think this happens more when I'm writing Albert than perhaps anything else. I'll get to the end of a paragraph and I'll just sit there laughing because it's so hysterical. I say, where did that come from? That is just hilarious. But this goes to my philosophy of creativity, and I think that it begins with God. God is the creator, and he is always creating, always has been created, always will be creating, and as a result, there's this river of creativity that flows through the universe, and it can be a multi-level river. The one level is art. The other level is music. The other level is words. The other level is building. The other level is architecture. Whatever it is that requires intense creativity. Our job is to make ourselves sensitive to that river, to be able to dip our ladle in it and come up with it, whatever's passing at the time. People often ask me about music. I can write I can write a song. I can write a symphony. I can write any kind of music at the drop of a hat, because that river is always flowing through my mind, always at the back of my mind, and I can dip my ladle in it at any time. But it's not coming from me. It's coming from from God's creative, the residue of God's creative power and energy that I have made myself susceptible to tap into that. And I think that's one of the things that you do in training yourselves creatively. I think creative people, the reason they're so diffuse, so many people in their interests, is because all these rivers are running together in their minds, and they've got their ladle and they're just dipping and dipping, and they think they're coming up with something, but they're not. They're just dipping into the river.
Well, I think there's a testament to that kind of being the more likely than not, is the fact that how people have ideas simultaneously, even in terms of inventions or different things on different sides of the world at almost the same time. And you can almost guarantee that if you have an idea, somebody else who's also looking for that type of idea has just had, or at least soon has had the similar idea. And it feels like that. And it seems like a lot of the creative energy is geared towards the time. It's almost like it's seasonal too, and what you dip into is going to be relevant and pertinent to the times that you're in, which is very interesting. I think that's an interesting dynamic. And I like the idea, of God being a creator, and we are his creation, and we are also thereby creators, so we are continually creating.
Created in his image, so we have to be creative. And a lot of people don't tap their creative energies. They have other giftings, but a lot of people think, well, God gives somebody a talent, and that's not what happens. God maybe inspires you and gives you the gift, but it's up to you to nurture and to grow that gift, and through practice and work to make it a talent.
Yeah,
to make
like
it
Cam, have you had to
worth
work
sharing.
at your VO?
Yes.
He didn't just
Actually,
open his mouth and something come out, you know.
yeah, actually, though, no, there is something that you tap into, like you were saying. Sometimes, yes, you have to work, but you also depend on that creativity to be there.
Yeah, that's
And
the
you
inspiration.
tap into it, and then
Yeah,
you just start flowing, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, where does this come from?
yeah. But you take that inspiration and
Mm-hmm.
you have a choice of what you're going to do with it. And sometimes it takes real birth pangs to bring that
Right.
inspiration, that seminal idea, and turn it into something that's alive and worth sharing.
It's interesting too what you can do with it, because the creative idea, you can use it for, I think you can use it to inspire, challenge, change, and create something positive in the world, or you can use it to create something destructive and negative. I've often remember with some of my film students, I'd say, why is that in there? And they're in their story, why are you putting that in there? Like, because I want to shock people, or whatever the reason,
Yeah.
whatever the reason is. And it leaves you feeling sick, or it leaves you feeling just discouraged, or, and I think there's a responsibility we have as creatives. And I often tell every director this, because I said, whatever you're creating, you're putting out there, you're going to impact people. You'd better know what kind of impact you're having and why you're having it. There's a responsibility as a creative to know that you are, I guess you're in a way responsible for the consequences of what you have created and what you are creating. I think it's a lot it's a lot higher calling than not using your creativity. There's a responsibility to it.
Nothing is cheaper and easier than shock value. There's nothing creative about shock value. It's just so easy. It's like a cheap joke. It's like a fart joke. Everybody laughs, but it's not a joke. It's just silliness. It's the opposite of creativity. A good example is of how these creative things run in cycles. This drives me crazy. How many times have you seen a movie in which the hero is walking away from an explosion? Behind him something
Never.
explodes.
Never.
I mean, that was done once. I don't know when it was done, and then it seems like everybody.
I think it was done in The Great Train Robbery. Was the first time.
Yeah, really, I think Cecil B. DeMille did it.
Yeah, he was the first time. The guy's walking away from the great train as it blows up in the background. I think that was the first time.
I mean, it's like, who got the idea? Hey, that's cool. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. It's like, when you don't have an ending, like I always tell you, blow stuff up.
Blow stuff. I can remember, what do we do with this baby carriage? Blow it up. Blow it up.
There are so many the movies that start off with, man, this is a great idea. They can't pay it off. You watch, they're going to blow something up, and sure enough, the hero walks away from the explosion. The end.
You can blow it up to
so
credits.
Cheap, so easy.
Credits.
It's so easy to start a creative project, and it is suffering, and it is work to bring it to a successful conclusion.
Yeah, to bring it to a satisfying conclusion is like where the audience just feels like, even if it ends like, okay, the hero doesn't win or whatever, there's a satisfaction, a resolution that pays off everything that you've set up in such a satisfying way. You watch the story like, oh, that was amazing. I want to watch it again because it was like, it was amazing. Yeah. Most stuff I feel like it's like a potato. It's like most of the time you get mashed potatoes with no milk, no butter, no salt, and it's just like, you can chew it. It's food, but it's like
very unsatisfying.
Yeah, but when it's like it's got the bacon, it's got the everything on the cheese, the cheddar, and you're just like, oh, I want another one. I'm not eating bacon anymore, but oh well, Dad, thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Entertainment Dudes. Probably actually our longest episode to date. Who knows? When we cut it down, it might just be five or 6 minutes.
Cut me out of it and say, yeah.
No, I wonder if we cut Cam out of this one. I think you asked one question. Do you have any other questions, Cam, you would like to ask so we could have you featured in it as well?
So I can have my featured. No, I'm good. I mean, I asked a couple questions. So.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I often feel like sometimes it depends who we're talking to. That I'm like, Cam, you want to ask a question? Who was that other guy was with us? Do you remember?
Hey.
Oh dear. Well, it was. Wait a second. I'm getting dizzy. Don't do that to an old man.
All right, there we are.
But it was a pleasure. It was a joy. I enjoyed that, and I got everything. I got everything on the improv sheet. The whole thing. It's all there. So
okay. Did you tell the part about how awesome Cam is too?
Oh, absolutely. That was page 3 through 7.
8-point font.
You just want me to read it? I
Nice.
can't read it.
Yeah. We have another hour of this episode, so let's go for it. So, if somebody wants to find what you're working on currently, where can they go? Where's the best place to buy your books? Where can they get your stuff?
The books are available on Amazon, as is the music. I've got davidcrossman.com, and they can find out everything they need to know.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining
Right.
us on another exciting episode of
You're
Entertainment
so
Dudes.
welcome. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm glad that Jason. I'm glad you showed up this time. And
It was.
I think this is the sequel. You realize the first episode, the installment, was just Cam and David in deep conversation. That's when we got into a lot of philosophy and really deep stuff that we couldn't cover here. So
you waxed because I'm here now, so we had to dumb it down.
I waxed poetical. He waxed his legs. It's just
I wax on.
And I wax off.
absent. You waxed absent.
Oh, look at that.
He's
All right.
gone.
Well, he's gone. I'm going to
can
leave here
take a
pretty
hint.
soon. So thank you for
just-
being on the show.
I'll just stay here by myself. God bless. Bye-bye.
Entertainment Dudes.